Ladies and gentlemen, please do not start your engines because gas is currently the most expensive that it's ever been. And we haven't seen an energy crisis of this magnitude since 1973, when Saudi Arabia declared an oil embargo on any country that supported Israel, which caused gas prices all over the Western world to skyrocket. And the situation nowadays isn't all that different. As a result of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, President Biden signed the executive order on March 8th that banned the importation of Russian crude oil into the United States. And unfortunately, Russia is one of the biggest producers of crude oil in the world, much like Saudi Arabia was back in 1973. So as the result of this war, as well as a ton of other factors, we're back in a similar position to the one we were back in the 70s, except that things may be even worse this time around. Yes, with the current US sanctions on Russian oil and similar sanctions having been made by the EU, plus a massive production cut from Saudi Arabia, the Western world is facing a gas crisis that's just about as bad as it's ever been. In fact, it's estimated that the US has just 25 days left of diesel fuel. What's YouTube girlfriend gonna do with her diesel Jeep? I guess I'm gonna have to drive her around. And if you couldn't tell by Joe Biden's face in that picture, that's seriously concerning. So basically, we're facing a situation where oil supply is extremely low. Reserves are drying up and prices are rising to historic levels. And that is not good for anyone. But there's also not much that we can do about it. We certainly can't go back in business with the Russians because, well, that would be indirectly funding their war effort against Ukraine, which would be awful. But we also can't just fill the gap left by Russian oil overnight. Before this war began, Russian oil constituted of 8% of all US oil imports. And that's a lot of our supply that's gone missing. So in this video, I'm gonna dig a little bit deeper into what's going on with the 2022 oil crisis, how far this crisis is going to affect all of our sectors of the economy, and what you can do to insulate your money from this economic shitstorm. Excuse my French. And if you're new here, my name is Brad Danger. This is Ideal. Please subscribe, turn on that notification bell. And if you're in the market for a new car, well, it might be time to take a look at those electric models because this is the 2022 oil crisis and what we're gonna do when there's no more fuel. Let's go. Let's just start off at the beginning by talking about how this problem came about, how that massive demand got created, and how that rug just got pulled from beneath our feet in moments' notice. So let's just start off by saying that this whole oil crisis has been especially hard for the US. But why is that? Well, we consume more oil than any other country on the face of the planet. Currently, our oil consumption is sitting at right around 19 million barrels per day. Compare that with China, which consumes 12 million gallons per day, and you see that we consume more oil than any other country by far. However, the US actually produces 14 million barrels of oil every day, making us also the #1 producer of oil in the world. I bet that you didn't know that we produce more oil than any other country in the world, did you? Well, it is true, but we're still running at a deficit of about 5 million barrels per day. However, that's not the whole picture. The United States actually exports about half of its production to other countries, and then turns around and buys the rest of what they need from Canada, Mexico, Russia, Saudi Arabia, and Colombia. So you may be wondering why the United States would export its oil even though we operate at a deficit. Well, we produce a whole lot of crude oil, and a country needs other types of oil to operate as well. So while we have excess of crude oil, we may have a major deficit for other types of oil like petroleum. So we trade away a ton of our crude oil, and meanwhile, we're buying up other kinds of oil that we need. All this trading has made the United States one of the largest exporters of crude oil in the world. Now, that may sound fantastic for the US. We're making a ton of money by selling our oils overseas. However, not everyone is really happy about that. Specifically, OPEC wasn't so thrilled. If you don't know who OPEC is, it stands for the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, and it's basically a collection of 13 countries that have decided to work together to control the global oil supply. They currently control more than 80% of the world's crude oil, and long story short, they don't want to give up their market share anytime soon. Essentially, they see the US as a threat and are willing to take drastic actions in order to retain their share of the global oil market. OPEC and the US have been at odds for years now, and the tension has never been greater than right now, because OPEC just made a seriously drastic move. They cut oil production in the middle of a global oil shortage in a time of record high inflation. Now, You're asking, why is that such a big deal? And why did they do that? Well, let's get into all that and also take a look at how it could affect the rest of the global economy. Now, if you're a bit confused up until this point, that's okay. The global oil trade is extremely complicated and nuanced, and every country that produces oil is constantly jockeying to manipulate the price of oil to their favor and to gain more of the global market share. With that being said, OPEC, which was basically led by Saudi Arabia, just made a power move. By cutting back their production of oil by 2 million barrels daily, they've essentially guaranteed that the global price of oil is going to go way up. Think about economics 101. When supply goes down, prices go up. It's simple. Now, why would they do such a thing? Well, certain US officials believe that OPEC is in support of Russia, and that by driving up the price of oil, they're supporting the Russian economy because the Russian economy thrives with high oil prices. However, Saudi Arabian officials have maintained that this is not the case. Saudi Arabia has said that they're cutting production of oil in preparation for the global recession that most economists believe we're headed towards. Yeah, in case you haven't heard, the US economy is also certainly going to go into a recession within the next year, most likely, and the global economy is going to take a hit too. So, because of all this, and especially because the US is the biggest consumer of oil in the world, Saudi Arabia claims that they're cutting back oil production in order to prepare for the massive drop in demand that they're anticipating. And that, well, certainly does make sense. It's just a happy coincidence for Saudi Arabia that their oil production cuts are helping their friends in Russia. Maybe, maybe not. Either way, these production cuts have a serious impact on prices of oil and have continued to drive already high prices even higher. And this is just one more thing to pile onto an already crazy global oil economy. I mean, there was a pandemic that destroyed the demand for oil. There was a deep freeze in Texas in 2021 that shut down oil refineries all across the state. Last year's winter was horrible for European oil production. And then Russia invaded Ukraine, and suddenly their supply of oil is off limits. Luckily, the United States has what's called the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, a massive store of petroleum that will get us through times like this, right? Well, let's hope so. So, after the 1973 gas crisis that I mentioned before, the US government decided that they would create the Strategic Petroleum Reserve in case anything like this ever happened again. Essentially, it's just a massive reserve that usually has between 600 and 700 million barrels in case of an emergency. And well, it seems that the US may have underestimated the magnitude of the emergency in this case, because the Strategic Petroleum Reserve has fallen to its lowest level since 1984. On top of that, the US has only 25 days left of diesel supply, and the global demand for oil is still strong as the global economy attempts to restart after the pandemic. So all of this is essentially pointing to the fact that we could be headed towards a global energy shortage. And that's going to affect pretty much anyone who's watching this video right now. Yes, you and me. So let's take a look at how. Now, first of all, what's the US government planning to do about all this? Well, there isn't really much that they can do. They passed the NOPEC bill, which essentially gave them the option to sue OPEC for manipulating prices, but OPEC kind of just does what it wants to do when it wants, kind of like TikTok. And that bill isn't going to do much. Biden also announced that he'd be releasing more oil from reserves, which is going to drop the price of oil for a very short time, but won't have any sort of lasting effect. And then the government wants to encourage more domestic production of oil, but that's going to take a long time to catch up with our current shortage. So, all in all, we're kind of just screwed, and most of us are just going to have to deal with the fuel prices going to the moon and then beyond. And that's going to be due to what's called cost push inflation, which is essentially when consumers are forced to make up for the increases in the costs of wages or raw materials in an industry. So, yeah, prepare for higher gas prices and also for higher inflation and also higher interest rates. So here's where I actually give advice in this video. Essentially, now is a bad time to spend money on anything. Right now, you should be saving every dollar that you can because gas prices are high, which means that you'll be spending too much money at the pump. Inflation is high, which means your dollar doesn't go as far, and interest rates are high, which means that borrowing is extremely expensive. Now is the time to build your savings. And if you're looking to invest some of those savings, well, now might be the greatest time to get into renewable energy. This global oil shortage will surely rile people up behind renewable energy. They're gonna say, well, if I can't rely on gas, then we need to start turning towards other forms of energy. People are already going to buy more electric cars, businesses are going to already buy more solar, and those electric and solar industries may actually get a great benefit from this global oil crisis. So if you're looking to invest, I'd say that there's a real opportunity here to make some money on the rise of renewables. Plus, these renewables are cleaner and you'll be helping the environment by investing in them. Other than that, save your money as much as possible. Prices for almost everything are going to rise in the near future as the result of this global oil price gouge. And it's really not going to be good for anyone. Save your money, try to keep your head above your water, keep your eyes on what the global oil market's doing, and maybe even consider investing in renewable energy. If anyone else out there has any advice on how to weather this shitstorm, please hit us with a comment down in the description. And don't forget to like, subscribe, turn on that notification bell, and check out this Ideal Money video up here or what YouTube recommends you watch down here. I'm Brad, this is Ideal. Let's get rich together and promise me one thing, keep living the ideal lifestyle.